So today we are going to look into stored procedure and triggers. So far we have seen SQL queries, and yesterday for the first time we have seen how to write blocks of SQL statement. Okay, it's a block of statements. How to control which statement should execute. Right, we worked on a programming construct. For example, based on a condition, if else condition, we can control which statement to execute. Should this block of statements to get executed, or should this block of statement should get executed based on a condition. There are two types of condition that we saw yesterday. So one is based on a variable value. Okay, what value that we pass, based on that we can decide, system will decide, okay, which one to get execute. And second is, we have seen based on existence of record for a given condition, right? Based on record, existence of record in a table, right? For the given condition, we using if exists or if not exists, based on that we executed. So now, since we are exposed to the variables, table variables, parameters, and also the programming construct, it's a time for us to get introduced with the store procedure and trigger, because both of them are more of a programming construct. Okay, so far we have finished these sessions, plus we have also finished session 11. Okay, so today we are going to look into the lesson 12, and today we are going to look into the stored procedure, how to write a stored procedure, what is a stored procedure, right? What all its benefits, is there any limitation, and then we are also going to see trigger and its overview and types of triggers. Case study. Okay, so this case study, I think we pretty much know now that we are building an app or database for a restaurant. Okay, and we are capturing the customer visits, item ordered, master items, which is nothing but menu, and it should answer many business questions. I think till today probably we would have addressed some 30 plus business questions. We'll see on the last session, we are going to see how many business questions that we have solved through this 15-day training program. Today we are going to address these three questions. Today we are going to address these three questions. We are going to write a stored procedure or a subroutine, right, to list the veg or non-veg or both items based on the input variable. And we are also going to write a stored procedure to list the order details by summary, maybe aggregated month-wise, day-wise, week-wise, that we are going to see based on a parameter. The same procedure, based on the parameter, it has to produce different output. And finally we are going to write a trigger. We are going to create a trigger which will prevent anyone to order more than 10 quantity in a single order. Okay, let's try. So before that we will also learn what is a trigger. So with stored procedure, it is a pre-compiled block of code. Okay, so I think let me stop my video because to save bandwidth. So we are going to see stored procedure. So what is a stored procedure? Stored procedure is also similar to subroutine. It is also called subroutine, or this is also similar to the construct that you see in other programming languages or methods. So stored procedure is very complex in nature. You can create a single stored procedure with maybe 5 lines, or you can create a stored procedure with maybe 5,000 lines. Right, both are possible. Many business logic, right, process heavy business logic used to have stored procedure. In some cases, report procedure will have a report also will have a procedure. For example, in a OLTP application, based on let's say 10 parameter, you need to generate a report. Okay, it will give a lot of details about the transactions. So you can create one stored procedure and then with the parameters. The advantage of stored procedure is it's a pre-compiled. Pre-compiled is, all the compilations would have gone through, all the business plan. Basically, SQL knows exactly, okay, this procedure needs to be executed in this way. Okay, so the query plan would have would have been cached already. So all these things would have happened. That's the biggest advantage of stored procedure, right? So we can just execute maybe 5,000 lines of code with parameter. So it's highly parameterized. So it is a reusable. It is like, as I mentioned, it is like a construct or method or function in other programming languages. It accepts in parameter as well as out parameter. It also returns a value. So it has three different mechanism to interface. So we are going to see everything today. A procedure has a procedure name and it has input parameters. For example, this is one syntax for store procedure. The syntax starts with create procedure, the name of the procedure that you give. So here they have just followed USP. USP is user defined store procedure. Okay, it is user created store procedure. Right, get employees test 2. I think some test purpose no people have created. Last name, it's a data, it's a parameter, right? As I mentioned in yesterday's class, at variable, at prefix is used to specify that this is a variable. So variables are used for parameters. Here last name is one parameter and first name is one parameter. These two parameters, and based on the parameter that you enter, right, you can have your logic inside the store procedure. This store procedure is very simple store procedure. It has only one parameterized query. Okay, so that's why they don't have even, they have not specified begin and end also, because it's only one procedure, only one line, right? And the syntax is similar to that, as and then begin and end, in case if you have multiple lines of code. Okay, and then this is for defining. How do you execute? To execute a store procedure, we have to call either using execute or execute or exec, and then followed by the store procedure name. Okay, this is how we will be executing a store procedure. So we are going to see the store procedure execution and creation with an example now. Okay, I'm going to change the context to restaurant, and and instead of going for a very complex store procedure, I'm just creating a very simple store procedure first. So the create store procedure, and this is a name that I'm giving. I'm giving a simple name saying multiply by 10, and it accepts one input value, an integer, and output value, output parameter, and that is also an integer. You see how SQL knows it is an input or output. For input, you don't need to specify anything, but for output, you need to say out. Okay, so followed by out. If you say, SQL knows that this parameter is a output parameter, and then I've written begin and end, and then what I'm doing, I'm executing select output into 10. Okay, select output into 10 is what I'm just I'm creating a store procedure. Since this procedure is already there, either I can drop and recreate or I can alter, right? So I'm altering now the store procedure. This it only has, I'm setting the output variable with multiply by 10. So now we are going to see how I can declare a variable. So declaring a variable. Okay, so I'm declaring a variable which I want to pass it as an input. I'm setting up the value, and then I'm declaring an output variable, because only when I declare an output variable I can pass that as an output value, and SQL needs to send it back. Okay, so you see, this is how I'm going to execute the procedure. When I execute the procedure, I'm just passing the value of 23, and then I'm giving a variable called b and mention this is the output variable. So I'm giving in the same sequence, same order we need to specify. Okay, same order I'm specifying, and then SQL by the when I execute this procedure, SQL would return the value. So I'm just printing that value. Okay, so selecting at b. So with these 5 lines of code, I'm going to execute the store procedure by passing the variable. So if you see the value, we are getting 230 because it is multiplied by 10, right? So 23 value has gone as an input, and the input is multiplied by 10 and it is returning 230 as an output. So it's a very simple stored procedure. We are going to see some more examples. I've created another example. So inside a store procedure, we can even create a temporary table. We can even create a temporary table. Have we looked into the temporary table yet? Did we see what is a temporary table in our class? Yeah, store procedure is not just for automation, Vasu. So store procedure is basically creating the logic, entire logic encapsulated in within inside an object. Okay, and it is highly parameterized, and it is also, it would be highly performing because the query plan, the SQL knows in and out. Okay, so based on the parameter, which section of the code needs to be executed. It is also, you can also say it is for automation. For example, the same procedure I can schedule it, but the store procedure main purpose is not for automation, because any code can be automated, right? So store procedure is not specifically for automation. Store procedure is for creating a complete business logic, complex business logic encapsulated in an object, and it is parameterized. Based on the parameter, it will execute the code and it will produce output. For example, in a production environment, the HR processing, right, the every monthly payroll processing, it probably they would have written 10 to 20 store procedures. Okay, one procedure will be calling another procedure. So one procedure will do the PF calculation, another procedure will be doing maybe medical allowance, one procedure will be doing LTA or no, LTC calculation, one will do the leave calculation. So like that, you can create a procedure for a specific purpose. Okay, and then overall you can create one wrapper procedure, one wrapper or main procedure. So the main procedure will keep calling one by one. For example, if you want to visualize a procedure in a production environment, let's say you are calculating salary for all of your thousands of employees, then you would have written one procedure. So the procedure will say, okay, month alone you need to pass as a parameter, my year and month. So then that will have the logic. So that procedure, inside that will have one more procedure. It will get the list of employees, and then one employee by employee they will do the calculation. So for every employee they will call one procedure for leave calculation, one procedure for PF calculation, one procedure for income tax calculation. Like that they will do. So the procedure is more of a wrapper, the complete skeleton of the program. Okay, complete skeleton of the program which has the source code in it. Okay, so it is highly reusable. You don't need to again and again write, right? Because it is stored in the server. When you create the procedure with the name, the actual piece of code, the entire piece of code is gets stored inside the procedure, inside the server. Okay, so it's a reusable as well. Did okay, thank you. Yeah, yeah, it is kind of template. Yes, because you are right. Okay, so now we are going to see. Okay, so now I don't know whether I have covered a temp table in this session, so I will skip that. Now I'm going to go to the bus- business question. Business question is, write a program. Write a program or store procedure. Okay, store procedure to list the veg, non-veg or both items quantity and rate based on the input parameter value. So I've written a procedure. It's called SP item rate quantity. Okay, SP item rate quantity accepts veg flag as the care of one as the input. Because it is input, I am not giving IN or something like that. Okay, because SQL knows it is an input value by default if I don't specify out. Okay, and then as I mentioned, I have created a begin and then end. So it should always have a begin and end. Okay, so you see begin and end is there. And then I'm writing inside the logic based on the flag that you specify. You remember, I think those who attended yesterday's class, we have used this, we declared and we hard coded the value. Now we are just creating it as a procedure. So if it is a non-veg, then it will list the all the non-veg items which are ordered. If it is a V, then veg items will be listed. If it is B, means it will list both items. It will simply, without any condition, it will list all the items. Okay, so this is a procedure that I've created. So this is a logic. Okay, so the procedure, simple procedure that I've created. The same procedure I can I can attach to a procedure. For example, we have SSRS report, or we may have the Power BI, or we have Tableau, Microsoft, MicroStrategies. There are so many reporting tools, right? For all this report, I don't need to execute the statements, individual statement. I can simply execute this from the procedure, from the front end report. I can simply say like this, I can execute, right? I can simply call the procedure with the parameter what is selected by the user in the front end UI. I can pass that. So now if you see, there are two ways that I can pass this procedure. I can call this procedure. One is directly I can give the value. You see, B I am executing. B means both. You see, all the veg and non-veg items are getting executed. Or I can simply say V means the veg items will be executed. Okay, so veg items will be executed. If I execute, you see all the veg items, this block is for veg and all the veg items. Either you can directly pass the parameter value, or you can declare a variable and then pass the value. For example, I will say, let's say non-veg. It will execute for non-veg. There is only one order based. So now you guys understand how we can declare a procedure and then how we can execute the procedure. We have also seen how we can define an output variable, input variable and output variable, right? And how to read the output variable also we have seen, right? So we need to declare a variable for both of them, and then while passing we need to say this is an output variable, so that the procedure will return the value and assign the value to this, and the value can be printed. Okay, so we have seen the procedure also. Okay, so now I'm going back. Any question now? Yeah. So any question from anyone on the procedures? Otherwise, I will move on to the triggers. Okay, so let me move on to the procedure. So now store procedure can be a nested procedure also. For example, you know, one store procedure I can call another store procedure. As I mentioned, right, because in a production environment you may have, it's more of a uh, no, procedure which is a wrapper procedure, which may call maybe tens of procedures, or based on the condition, right? So one procedure can call another procedure. So the nested procedure is possible in SQL. So for example, I can call one store procedure inside another procedure. That's what I think I had executed earlier. For example, so here inside this procedure, I can call this procedure. For example, inside this procedure, I can call another procedure. So it will execute both. Okay. And now we are going to see store procedure versus user defined function. We have seen user defined function also, right? You might wonder why we have a separate user defined function and we have a store procedure. Store procedure is basically, it's the important, it can handle all the complexity, whereas user defined function is more of a function. Within a user defined function, we cannot create a table, we cannot drop a table, we cannot alter, we cannot execute any DDL statement. Within a user defined function, we cannot perform any DML operation also. But for a store procedure, we can do DDL operation, we can do any DML operation. So anything is possible inside a procedure. Okay, so everything is possible inside a procedure. So this is one important interview question which they will ask: what is the difference between store procedure and user defined function? Store procedure accepts output variable, output parameter also, whereas user defined function will not accept output variable. It will only accept the return value, UDF. Okay. So going back to the triggers for our next topic, trigger. So trigger is also a constraint. Let me explain what is a trigger. For example, uh, uh, in our bank, right? So for example, you may have a bank account. In your bank account, you also you go to a screen where you specify, I need notification for these whenever these transaction happens. For example, whenever my balance goes below 5,000, send me an SMS. Whenever I receive a money, I receive SMS. Okay. And whenever whenever a big amount is credited, I immediately get the notification, right? For example, suspicious account transaction. So immediately we get some notification by the system. So all these are called triggers. So triggers are an event based. When an event happens, you can specify a condition. When this event happens, alert me or do perform this operation. That is what is trigger. Trigger means when an event or when a condition occurs, follow up, it triggers another operation. You can specify what can be done. For example, in a no, I talked about a bank account, right? Bank account is very simple. You guys all understand, right? So whenever you, and also I think bank transaction also, you don't receive, if, let's say if you receive 500 rupees, sometimes you will not get SMS. You will get SMS only if you receive more than 5,000 rupees or 1,000 rupees, right? So it is also based on a data. Similarly, trigger is also, it is based on data and it is based on an event. A trigger is a special type of stored procedure that automatically runs when an event occurs in the database server. Okay, when an event happens. Example, even let's say when you drive car, right? When it goes, the petrol goes below a reserve, even, right? It gives a voice message saying a car is gone to reserve for you, right? So it is also a event is happening, right? Then it is alerting you. Similarly, an item in an inventory going out of stock, because in item, let's say cell phone, right? When the cell phone goes below 10 number of cell phones in a warehouse, then they need to procure, they need to again order and get, then only they can maintain the order, right? They can maintain the stock. So for that they may have a system, they will have a trigger, prevent an user from multiple concurrent login. The system in the software point of view, if a person login twice, does it allow the OTT and all? If you see, no, it doesn't allow second system to login, or sometimes 3 logins are allowed, fourth login will not allow. So all these things, no, you can control using triggers. Alter someone, suspicious, alert, actually not alter, alert someone when a suspicious unusual transaction in a banking or online transaction happens, right? So all these are an examples of a trigger. Syntax for creating a trigger. A trigger can be created on a table, because on a table only data is going to be changed, right? So you can create a trigger on a table or on a server, on a database. So now the create trigger followed by trigger name on a table name. Which table you are going to create? For example, account balance table you can create, right? Or item stock you can create. And then with the options are there, with, do you want to create for, after, instead of, we are going to see each one of them. When a new transaction gets inserted, do you want to trigger, do you want the trigger to validate? Do you want the trigger to get executed when an update statement happens, or when some records get deleted? So all these things can be configured. So these are the different types of triggers. So one is called log on. So I mentioned, right? For example, log on means if you want to restrict someone to concurrently log in 4 times, or if you don't want somebody to log in during peak hours, you can control, you can stop their login. Okay, for example, you don't want to allow the users from, let's say, morning 7 o'clock to 10 o'clock, that is the peak hours. You don't want, you want only 100 users to be logged in. You can even control it through trigger. So that is a log on. So when somebody logs on, the trigger will check and it will execute the action that you mentioned. DDL trigger is when a table is created, you can control who can create table, what naming convention they can use. You can also say the naming convention needs to be followed. When any table needs to be created, you can control through this. There are obviously other ways to do, but this DDL trigger will be triggered when you perform DDL operation. DML operation triggers are the common data modification, because ultimately data is very important, right? When the stock goes low, or when the account balance goes some suspicious transaction. So all these are examples of DML operation. Data is getting modified, right? So there are two types of triggers. One is called after trigger. Second is called instead of trigger. So we are going to see examples. Let's see. Log on trigger, as I mentioned. If let's say if you don't want to allow some any user, especially any user to log in more than 3 times concurrently, parallelly, at the same time, right? You can control and you can throw an error message. That is possible. So this is during the log on time. Anyone who is trying to log on to the application, right, or log on to the server, you can control. This trigger will be executed. This is called a log on trigger. Second is DDL trigger. DDL trigger can be created on a database. So in that database, you can stop anyone to drop tables or alter tables, right? If they do, you can also print. You must disable this trigger safely before you drop or alter, right? So this is a DDL trigger. The DDL trigger is somebody preventing somebody modifying the objects, right? Without no maybe system administrator permission. And then now coming to the DML trigger, first part, after trigger. After trigger is so after trigger is, let's say account balance transaction is happening. You are withdrawing money from ATM. Let's say account balance is going below 5,000, right? So then it is after the transaction the trigger will be executed and it will check the balance, and based on that it will maybe sending SMS or sending email, right? Sending any other means of alert that it can do. So these triggers will be performed after insert statement or after update statement or after delete statement, which you can specify. You can create a trigger only for on delete. You can create a trigger only for update. So you can configure, or you can create a trigger for all three operations. That is also possible. Okay. So we are going to see an example for trigger. So we are going to see a trigger. Okay, for that what I'm doing, okay, let me see. Let me see the example what I'm trying to do. Okay. This is insert into instead of. Okay. So what I can do is I'm creating a trigger now. So you see I'm creating a trigger. Okay, so I'm creating a trigger. So let's say we know, right, that we have a table called, what table we have? Restaurant table. Let me select star from the table. Select star from restaurant table. And then how many restaurants we have? We have 4 restaurants, right? We have 4 restaurants. And now I'm creating one table called audit table. Okay, so whenever any new restaurant is created, I want to make sure that that particular information is also stored in another table called restaurant audit. Okay, so if you see, I have already inserted. Let me delete those records. We will validate one more time. You will see the delete from restaurant audit, because I'm going to perform it again. I'm deleting the records, making it empty, and also let me delete that 4th record, right? Restaurant ID is equal to 4. Let me delete, because I'm going to insert it again. Okay, so now let's see how many records we have in restaurant. We have 3 restaurants in restaurant table, and we don't have any audit table. So now what I've done is I'm creating a trigger. So what trigger I'm creating? I'm creating a trigger restaurant audit. So what this will do, this trigger I've created on restaurant table. Whenever you see after insert, so only whenever a new restaurant is created, because creating a restaurant is a big activity, right? The restaurant owner should know. Nobody we cannot, it's not like a order, right? It's not a restaurant order. We're ordering a new item or something like that. This is a restaurant. Opening a new restaurant and provisioning new restaurant is a big activity, right? The restaurant owner should know. And also they want to keep track of what time, which date the restaurant got added, who added, all the information that they want to capture it. For that, they have created a trigger, and the trigger, what it will do, it will insert the record into audit table automatically. Whenever any new record gets inserted into the restaurant table, whenever new record gets inserted into the restaurant table, it will also insert automatically a new record into the audit table. We are going to see that. Okay, let me see whether the trigger is already there. Okay, I think already trigger is there. So now I'm going to insert a record. So now I'm going to insert a fourth restaurant. We are going to see whether the trigger is automatically inserting. You see, I'm only inserting into restaurant. I'm not inserting into restaurant audit. We will see. You see, it is inserting one record into the main table, and the after trigger also is executed, and it has inserted one record into the restaurant audit. Let's validate the data. Now if you see the restaurant, it has inserted, it has, okay, it has not inserted because I think I have a different trigger. Instead of trigger, I think I should not have used the same name, but okay. So now I have instead of trigger, let me drop the trigger. Okay, now let me delete again. Okay, anyway, it is not there, right? Okay, so now I'm starting from again. Sorry for the confusion. So now this table is only having 3 records, and then restaurant audit is not having any record. Okay, now I'm going to create a trigger after trigger. So after trigger, you see, I'm creating now only, and this trigger is created, has been created to automatically insert a record into the restaurant audit. So now I'm going to insert Ganesh Bhavan, okay, in Mumbai. So when I insert, it is inserting 2 records. Let's see whether restaurant table has a record. Yes, restaurant table has a new record, and restaurant audit also, it would have automatically inserted a new record. You see, restaurant audit also automatically inserted. This is the work of DML trigger. DML trigger, which is after trigger. After trigger, after the actual operation. Actual operation is inserting into this table. After that operation, it will execute this piece of code. Okay. So this is similar to any piece of code that you can have. You can have a sending SMS, sending email to the owner saying new restaurant has been created. Everything is possible. This is how the SMS alert that we are getting from bank also works, or maybe different technology they use, but this is one way that we can use to implement. Okay, so now I'm going to show you another trigger. So this trigger is called instead of trigger. Instead of trigger is, it will not insert the data. Instead of executing the actual insert, it will perform another operation that you can configure. For example, let's say you are creating a new restaurant, and the new restaurant can be inserted into the restaurant table only after the owner approves. Okay, so in that case, we can create this instead of trigger. Instead of trigger that we can create, for example, the same name, now I'm going to create instead of trigger, right? So it's not going to be after trigger. You see, it's instead of insert. So instead of executing the insert statement, it is going to execute this statement. Okay, so now I've created a different trigger now. So now I'm going to execute inserting Balaji Bhavan. So what is going to happen? It is not going to insert record into this table. It is going to insert record only into this table because it is an instead of trigger. So in Pune, I am executing. In Pune, when I execute, you will see the restaurant table will not have that 5th record, whereas audit table has that record. So now what the owner is getting intimated saying, okay, new Balaji Bhavan is coming up in Pune. Just have a look at it manually and look at all the formalities and then approve. Once he approves, maybe that record can be moved to restaurant table. So this is this kind of process they can be implemented using instead of trigger. Okay, so now we have seen 4 type of triggers: log on trigger, second is DDL trigger, third is DML after trigger. It will perform the task, but after the trigger, it will also perform certain tasks that you define in the trigger. And fourth type is called instead of trigger. Instead of trigger is, instead of performing the actual insert or update delete, it will perform the piece of code that you write. Okay, so now we have answered the first one, right? First one we have already answered, and then I'm going to write a store procedure based on the parameter. It is going to return the data at a different level. Okay, so I'm going to show you. So I'm writing a new procedure. Okay, this procedure is called SP order data, store procedure order details. This is the procedure that I have written, and the parameter is aggregate by. Aggregate by is just a parameter that I have written, which is a character of 10. And based on the value that I pass as a parameter, if I pass month, then it will group by at month level, and it will show the data at a month level, the same order details. If I pass week, then it will give the week level information. Week level, how many amounts, how many quantity sold in the restaurant, how much revenue collected, right? For month wise it will give. If I give day, it will give the day wise. The same piece of code, but only the thing is group by is different. You see, group by logic is different. First is month, second is week, third is day. Okay, so now I've already created the procedure. I'm going to execute. So if I execute with month, so the procedure will execute and give the month, the September level. It is giving us 24 order quantities have been sold, and 1630 is the amount collected. Week level, week parameter if we pass, it will execute the data. It shows it is 36th week of the year, and the same because it's entire thing, right? So now if I give day, data day, yeah, day. So day if I pass, it will give breakup for daily. So this is September 1st, 20 orders have been sold, and for 1290 amount collected. Okay, so like this, now it's very simple for you. So you can from the front end report or application, even if you have mobile application, let's say how you visualize this. Let's say you are creating a mobile app for this restaurant manager. What he will do, you will log in, and then he will see three options in the drop down. So he will select month, and then he will click report, show the value. Then first statement, the procedure, what the mobile app will do, you will internally call this procedure with the month as a parameter, because he is selected month in the drop down. So based on that, this piece of code will execute, and it will show a month wise breakup for him. Then the drop down will have another two values, week and day. Based on that, you will execute. This is how it works. So you guys understand now how the right from user interface and the user action is converted and passed to the backend, and how in the backend the procedure is going to handle the request and return the value. Okay, so now we have seen that value also. Okay, so let me see if I have any. Yeah. So another question that I have, probably I don't think now we have time to finish. Maybe you guys can try prevent any item to be ordered for more than 10 quantity. So what you can do is, in the same trigger, for example, we can create a trigger after trigger, right? So for example, after insert, right? Instead of after insert, we need to say the order item quantity. If the group by item, if it is greater than 10, you need to roll back. You need to throw error. Then you will be able to prevent no customer can order more than 10 quantity. This is just to validate the functionality. There is nothing wrong in it, but this is one example that we can try. Maybe you guys can take this as a home assignment. Now if you want to try, you can create a trigger just to check the condition. If the new order placed, if any item quantity is greater than 10, then you just throw error message. You don't proceed. Okay, it's a quiz time, guys, now. So just get ready with your keyboard. Okay, I think I already have the answer too. Okay, so so for the first one, pre-compiled, parameterized and allow DDL. So it is obviously store procedure. Store procedure can allow DDL inside, and it will allow, it is a pre-compiled, whereas trigger does not it is not a parameterized. Trigger is not a parameterized, so it is not the right answer. And use define function, it is parameterized, but it does not allow UDF DDL inside. Similarly, view also is not a, it's only pre-compiled. It won't accept a parameter, and also it is not does not allow DDL statement inside. Okay, so store procedure is the right answer. And rise error is the one which I told you, right? Like if inside a trigger, if you want to throw error message, you can use the syntax. You for that raise error is the SQL command, wherein you can specify the error message. So you can say this order quantity is greater than 10, and then you can put 16 comma 1. 16 is more of a severity, and comma 1. So based on that, it will throw an error message and it will stop the transaction. And third is which trigger to use to restrict someone create a table. Right? It is obviously a DDL trigger. It is not logon trigger. It is not DML trigger. It is not after trigger. It is a DDL trigger using which you can restrict someone create a table. So with that, today we have kind of finished the programming construct. So the next two classes are going to be advanced SQL. 13 and 14 is going to be the advanced SQL that we are going to see. And after that, we will come to the end of the project. So thank you so much for your